Like to invite you for this 3-day wonderful journey exploring the yogas of the Gita. This is specially organized by Indica Yoga. As many might know, Indica Yoga is a part of the larger Indica family. It's a platform that aspires to offer authentic, immersive, and transformative yoga programs and experiences across the world. We have been operating since past 2 years, and this year itself we have a host of events, starting with a specialized Swadhyaya Mala focusing on Hatha Yoga Pradipika text, a 2-day immersion into Hatha Yoga Pradipika text that was followed by a 2-day conference on philosophy and praxis of yoga that looked into what actually authenticity means in the field of yoga, whether it is in the field of teaching, practicing, transmitting. In the teaching and the learning space, what is authenticity and how can we safeguard it? So, this was the theme that we explored in the 2-day conference on philosophy and praxis of yoga. And this was followed by a month long, in fact, 41-day global festival of yoga, starting from International Yoga Day and going on up to July 31st. So each day we had about three speakers, three exceptional speakers who brought out various facets of yoga, not just the asana part, but all the other things that will make yoga complete in itself, starting from Sanskrit to Sutra to philosophy to wisdom to mantras, every aspect, including Nada Yoga, music, every aspect was explored in nearly 124 sessions. And I would like to share all these sessions are available on Indica Yoga YouTube channel, free of cost. So kindly make use of it. And this was followed by a series of webinars. And today we have, for on the occasion of Gita Jayanti, this is a special occasion which is on the Ekadashi day of the Margashira. Margashira month is according to the Indian calendar, which roughly starts around December 15th and goes on for 1 month. So during this month, on the Margashira Shuddha Ekadashi, we will be celebrating Gita Jayanti. That would be on 25th of December. But as a precursor to it, we have organized this Weekend with Wisdom event where we will be exploring the three important paths, pursuits of the Gita, looking into the Jnana Yoga starting from today, Karma Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. And in order to explore this wonderful path, we have with us Swami Chidanand ji. Namaste, Swami Chidanand ji.
Namaste, namaste.
It's an honor to introduce Swami Chidanand ji. Most of you would be already familiar with him. Swami Chidanand ji has been a Vedanta teacher and a speaker on human values for more than 3 decades. After he served for 5 years as the resident Vedanta teacher at San Jose, California in the mid 1990s, his work has been mostly in India and the USA. Since 2006, he leads Fowai Forum, a non-profit organization that disseminates philosophical and spiritual knowledge with special coverage of Indian ethos. Numerous talks of him are available on YouTube at the Fowai channel. The author of 7 books, he is especially known for his presentations on Bhagavad Gita and the Upanishads. Hailing from Udupi district in Karnataka, he has been living in Solan, Himachal Pradesh since 2013. He had begun with a career in electronics engineering with a BE from Mysore University and MTech from IIT Madras. I guess he started with engineering, electronical engineering, but now moved on to human engineering in the field of yoga. So then he served Chinmaya Mission, the organization of Swami Chinmayanand for nearly 2 decades, and also at the foundation of J. Krishnamurti for 10 years. So with this background, Swamiji will be sharing his wisdom, his insight on the Gita. And I would like to request him to lead on from this point onwards, and also to invite all of you who have joined us this evening to enjoy this journey, and also request you, if you have any questions, we can take them at the end. Nearly we'll have about 15 to 20 minutes for question answers at the end. So I request all of you to stay and also participate and ask questions if any. So with this, over to Swamiji now. Namaste, Swamiji.
Thank you very much, Sri Vinaya Chandra, for this generous introduction. And more than that, so much of goodwill that exudes from you, and that makes all of us very comfortable. Now we are indeed blessed to get together this evening in India and apply our minds to this great text, Srimad Bhagavad Gita. I salute Lord Sri Krishna, Prapanna Parijataya, Totra Vetraika Panaye, Gnana Mudraya Krishnaya, Gita Amrita Duhe Namaha. And I salute Gita, who is regarded as Mother, Amba Tvam Anusandadhami, Bhagavad Gita, Bhavadveshini. Gita is called Bhavadveshini. She does not tolerate bhava. Bhava is egoistic existence, worldliness. When all of us are caught in self created bondage because of spiritual ignorance, we feel a certain separation from others, from God, from anything and everything. We live in isolation, and that living in isolation is nothing but the ego. So, bhava and the ego are synonymous. Bhavadveshini is the expression that describes Bhagavad Gita. For wisdom of the Gita eliminates our ego. We regain our true oneness with the divine. I am saying this especially because this series of three talks is all about yogas in the Bhagavad Gita, and the very word yoga is union. And from a Vedanta point of view, there is no separation really, but because of ignorance, we sense a separation. Therefore, that separation sensed in ignorance comes to an end. And it is all the more appropriate that on the very first day, this evening here in India, we are starting with a bang, taking up Jnana Yoga. For it is Jnana or Vidya that eliminates Ajnana or Avidya. Once more, avidya, ignorance, and the sense of separation are things that go together. They are like the two sides of the same coin. And many people, through a hasty reading of Bhagavad Gita, imagine that Gita is only about karma and bhakti. For many people, it is bhakti because hundreds of shlokas do say that we are to surrender to God, we are to take shelter in God, we are to have love of God. Therefore, devotion to God is what comes first to our mind, and no wonder certain schools of thought have defined Bhagavad Gita as a Bhakti Shastra. Hari Bhakti has been placed on the highest pedestal. We clarify that if we examine more carefully, there is Jnana, and Jnana, that is the wisdom which tells us our true nature, and going by that true nature, this wisdom tells us we are never apart from God. That is yoga, that is coming together. Now, many people regard Gita as a treatise on karma. Again, We respect karma. We, in the second talk in this series, will show the tremendous potential that karma yoga has for our own inner peace, for enhanced sense of fulfillment in life. Karma yoga and bhakti yoga are no doubt very great, but technically it is jnana that sets us free. There is a famous saying elsewhere in the scriptural lore, Jnana Devatu Kaivalyam. Liberation finally is through clear, right seeing. You may say, but does Gita talk about Jnana? Where? Wherever we see the glory of Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna, and so on. We say, read Gita carefully, and we shall presently also show several examples. For example, in the fourth chapter, Lord Sri Krishna says, even if we have sinned, we have made a lot of mistakes in life, we have been sinners. Api chedasi papebhyah sarvebhyah papakrittamaha goes a shloka, the fourth chapter, 36th shloka, and the punchline in the second half of that is Sarvam Jnana Plavenaiva Vrajinam Santarishyasi. All your troubles will go. You will cross. You will go across the wide river of worldly life through the boat. Jnana Plava. Plava means boat. And the boat is no other than Jnana, right knowledge. And in the same fourth chapter, there is a well known phrase, Nahi Jnanena Sadrisham Pavitramiha Vidyate. There is nothing as purifying as right understanding. Jnana is not just wordy knowledge where somebody has a lot of information, has memorized the shlokas or phrases and so on in even Sanskrit or in any language. Not that kind of accumulation of information, memorizing a whole lot of stuff or logically talking on things. No, all of them are stepping stones. Jnana is an understanding, a totally different way of seeing who we are and what this world is. Therefore, friends, don't take jnana casually. Jnana is actually a quantum leap. It is a transcendental affair. It is a shift of consciousness from the present body consciousness. I am the body idea. I am this personality with these strengths and those shortcomings, etc. That we have that idea. When we ask ourselves, who am I? We get an answer. Oh, I am good in this, I am good in that, but I'm not so good there. I am very knowledgeable, but not rich enough, blah, blah. There's a long list of who I am. Jnana puts that whole long list to the back seat. It rolls up that whole long list of 100 answers that you may have to the question, who am I? It rolls up that sheet of paper, if it is written on a sheet of paper, and throws it to the back seat. And the nature of jnana is when we see, not just talk, we see that I am certain principle, certain truth, which has no birth, no death, which doesn't undergo any change. At this point, some of you definitely would say, Swamiji, you have read other books and those things you are bringing into Gita. Where has Bhagavad Gita talked about this birthless, deathless, changeless reality as our true nature? I am telling you, I will show you now shlokas. right in the first 15 verses that Sri Krishna speaks in the second chapter. As most of you know, Sri Krishna's teachings begin in the 11th verse of the second chapter. So 11 to 25, if you count, there are 15 verses. Sri Krishna's teachings begin with a bang with those 15 verses. In those 15 verses, there are these shlokas, Najayate mriyate va kadachit. You have a powerful shloka. 20th verse, second chapter. The soul, you and I are the Atma. We have a body, we dwell in the body, we express ourselves in the body, but we are not the body. What we are is called the Atma. And about this Atma, which you and I are, Sri Krishna speaks without mincing words. Na jayate, na mriyate. The truth of you has no birth at all, no death at all. It is
ये
not
है वो है,
subject to change.
ये तो काला काला लग रहा है.
Now, in the 24th verse, Sri Krishna again comes down emphatically. Achedyoyam, adahyoyam, akledyaha, ashoshyaha. The truth of our existence, to which presently we are blind because of spiritual ignorance, avidya, the truth of our existence cannot be cut by any weapon, cannot be burnt by fire, cannot be made wet by water, cannot be dried up by winds blowing over it. Poetry and mystical wisdom come together in the shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita. This jnana of what we truly are is what makes Jnana Yoga a great discipline. To study it, to reflect on it, to think how I can be that. I get a feeling I am this body. But here it is said, I am not the body. I am Dehi, the one that is in the body, not Deha. Dehi Nityam Avadhyoyam Dehe Sarvasya Bharata is the shloka. In everybody's body, which is subject to injury, there is the Atma, which is avadhya, that is not subject to injury. And this jnana, found probably in 60 or 70 verses spread across the entire Bhagavad Gita, are to be placed on top. And Lord Krishna's 100% approval is with that approach. Don't count the number of shlokas to decide what is the paramount teaching of the Gita. It is not the length, it is not the number of shlokas, but it is the weight, it is the importance in terms of meaning that make Jnana Yoga the highest teaching of Bhagavad Gita. But we do not mind saying once more that Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga have tremendous capacity to lift us to great heights. No wonder, therefore, Mahatma Gandhi, Vinoba Bhave, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and so many others highlighted Bhagavad Gita for Karma Yoga. We will talk about Karma Yoga in detail tomorrow, but Karma Yoga is not the ultimate and the highest teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. Then there are some people who say, well, Gita is meant mainly to know what our duty is, Swadharma. In fact, someone very nicely said, if you pick up Bhagavad Gita, the first word, not even the first full word, half word, Dharma Kshetre, take half of it, Dharma. Then go to the last shloka, 18th chapter, 78th shloka. Dhruva nitir mama. Mama is the last word. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, Yatra Partho Dhanurdhara, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruva Nitir. Last word is mama. So people say, take that mama and take the first word dharma. There you have mama dharma, my duty. What is my duty as a son? What is my duty as a husband? What is my duty as a wife? Or playing the role of a teacher or an administrator or attorney, lawyer. See, all of us are placed in various scenarios. And depending on where we are placed, where life has brought us, of course, we have a swadharma. My duty is not the same as somebody's duty. So, to understand correctly my swadharma, which is not like the kind of but it is to be discerned and determined by understanding my nature. So, Swadharma is very important. That is the teaching of Gita, people say. Again, with folded hands, we tell them Sri Krishna does give a lot of importance to Swadharma. It is true that Lord Krishna says, Swadharme nidhanam shreya. It's better to die doing our true duty rather than coming under some fancies, some attraction, some fascination for somebody else's duty and try to do that. No, you must know what you are meant for, how your personality is. You must know uh, where you will be able to give the best to the society. All of them go together. So Swadharma is praised. Paradharmo bhayavaha. To try to act like somebody else. A nice teacher who is teaching children in a village, let us say, and everybody loves his classes or her classes, and he too actually loses himself in the class, somehow watches a few Bollywood movies and says, I think I should go to Bombay and become an actor. Shiva Shiva. If he goes there, he may make some money, but down the road, he will be miserable. Those days in the village where he sat with a bunch of students, drawing a small salary in a simple setting, his joy had no bounds. But with the money and glitter and glamour, he may become successful too, in a sense, in Bollywood. He will not have the same peace if nature has made him or had made him a teacher. So it could be other way also. Somebody meant for Bollywood to be an actor or a singer or a director, whatever, somehow decides to become an IT professional or something else. Paradharmo bhayavaha. Now we say, no doubt Sri Krishna has touched upon Swadharma, but please study with proper teachers. Kathopanishad says, Prapya Varan Nibodata. Go to right teachers and understand the truth of the scriptures. Don't jump to conclusion. Swadharma, no doubt, is praised, but what actually is on a higher level is Swarupa Dharma. On the personality level, I may be made for a lawyer or to be a businessman, to be a Bollywood actor, or to be a village school teacher, personality level. But behind the personality, there is my true nature. That is the ultimate Atma. Atma Jnana is the highest truth that is taught. Therefore, not Swadharma, not Karma Yoga, not even Bhakti Yoga is the highest teaching. With due respect to all of them, they can do wonders to us. But the last phase of the story of the Jiva, before he gets liberated or she gets totally freed, is pure Samyak Darshana, Jnana. At this point, I may as well raise and answer the question, is Bhagavad Gita a Dharma Shastra or a Moksha Shastra. We say it is many things rolled into one. On lower levels, it is Dharma Shastra. It asks us to do the right and give up the wrong. It tells us noble values and it shows us and warns us against ignoble, mean ways of living. Dharma Shastra. It is Bhakti Shastra, it is Karma Yoga Shastra on lower levels. But if you advance, for advanced students, Bhagavad Gita is Moksha Shastra. Therefore, one of the Dhyana shlokas says, Sarvo Upanishado Gavah Dogdha Gopala Nandana Partho Vatsa Sudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitamritam Mahat. All the Upanishads are cows. Sri Krishna is the cowherd who milks the cows. And Partha, Arjuna, is the calf that gets the first half a liter of the milk. And all of us, Sudhihi, if we are equipped with certain noble qualities, we are the ones who drink the rest of the milk. Dugdham Gitamrutam. And what is the milk itself? It is the nectarine milk that is no other than the teachings of the Gita. Dugdham Gita Amritam Mahat. So, Upanishads are Moksha Shastra, that is well known. Gita is an echo of the Upanishads. It is a saramsha, it is a summary, it is a restatement of the Upanishads. Therefore, Gita also is a Moksha Shastra. Now, if you ask me, so what is this Jnana Yoga? It is the Jnana of our true nature, right? Because Jnana, the word means knowledge. So, even if you have knowledge of your duty, that is also Jnana. But that doesn't liberate you. Jnana of your true nature, your relation with God, that liberates you. So, okay, tell us a little more about this jnana. Is it just about as the pure self, as the Atma, we neither die nor are born? That's all? No, it has more dimensions. And one of them is in our true nature. This is also, a significant leap from our present perception of who we are. If we know our true nature, we shall find that we are not a doer, we are not an enjoyer, we are not a sufferer. Ordinarily, day in and day out, we do things with the idea of, I did this today, I could not do that. This I did very well, and that I messed up. Oh, And sometimes when we do something well, we pat ourselves on the back. I did so well, whatever it is. So that is called kartrutva. And when we are punished or we are put to some discomfort, we say, you have no idea how I suffered those days. So I suffered, I am suffering, or I enjoyed, and I'm having a great time now. I am excited. So we see ourselves as enjoying or suffering. That is called bhoktrutva. And this jnana that sets you free is marked by a clear understanding. I am not a doer. I am not an enjoyer or sufferer. Once more, some of you will have a suspicion on this Swami speaking. This Swami has read some Shankara something. This may not be said in the Gita original. In this manner, you may say, Adi Shankara hasn't said anything which is not said in the Gita. He has only laid it in front of us with more clarity. Shankaracharya quotes when he says the pure self is not a doer. He quotes in the third chapter as an example. There are many others as an example. Third chapter, 27th shloka. Sri Krishna says, Ahankara vimudhatma karta aham iti manyate. Only people who are deluded by egoism. We have 100 ways in which we get deluded by egoism. I had a friend who one day was very proud. With chest up, he was moving around, and we asked him, what makes you appear very proud today? He said, see today's newspaper. We saw the newspaper. He was standing next to the chief minister of the state in the picture there. He said, now you know who I am. He is not the chief minister. Reflected glory. I am the daughter of so and so. That so and so may have achieved something, but you are feeling proud that you are his daughter or her daughter. So, in 1,000 ways, that is called ahankara. Ahankara vimudhatma karta aham iti manyate. Or if you want a second example of this jnana, a taste of this jnana, in the 5th chapter, there are 2 shlokas where Lord Krishna says, a wise person, lady or man, every instant knows that he or she is not doing anything at all. There is a pair of shlokas, Naiva kinchit karomi iti yukto manyeta tattvavit. Yuktaha here is a wise person. In fact, yukta is the adjectival form of yoga. Someone who is into this higher yoga is yukta. Yuj is the dhatu. Naiva kinchit karomi. I don't do anything. And there's a string of present participles over there. Pashyan shranvan sprishan jigran ashnan gachan swapan shwasan pralapan visrajan granhan unmishan nimishan api. While seeing, while hearing, while walking, while sitting, while getting up, while closing one's eyes, while opening one's eyes, a long list. While doing a variety of things, a wise person knows she is not doing anything at all. You may ask, who is doing then all this? We are seeing this action going on. The wise person, this second shloka says there, Indriyani indriyartheshu vartante iti dharayan. She understands that the eyes are seeing, the mind also may be with the eyes. I am pure light. I don't own up, either seeing or not seeing. I don't own up either success or failure. If some tragedy has taken place in my life, I don't own up. Nothing has happened in my life. And if some grand success took place in my life, nor do I own that up. There was a great Mahatma in Bombay, Nisargadatta Maharaj. He was alive even as late as 1981 or something. So once people asked him, Maharaj, what's the difference between your world and our world? And his witty answer was, yeah, that's a good question. In your world, a lot of things happen. In my world, nothing happens at all. Very puzzling answer. That means, even though many things may seem to be happening, the wise person does not identify, own them. I lost my daughter, my business failed, or my husband left and went away, walked away with another woman, something like that. If we have the wisdom, we notice everything. We are not anchored in the ego, which loses or gains. We are above the ego. This akarta, abhokta is also a terrific insight into jnana. Some of you would wonder at this moment, are you just going to talk about the nature of jnana, or does Bhagavad Gita talk about how to get that jnana? Some of us are action oriented. We roll up our sleeves and say, okay, that is enough. We agree that jnana is great. Now tell us how quickly we can get it. Can we download this or order this jnana on Amazon? Gita says, Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya upadekshyanti te jnanam jnaninah tattvadarshinaha. Friends, in this very world which has so much sorrow, so much conflict, so much strife, so much turmoil, in this very world, at any point of time, our time not being an exception, COVID time not being an exception, in this very world, there are jnanis. Approach them, go to them, meet them respectfully. Feel free to ask them questions at the right time. And Sri Krishna says, they will instruct you. Don't just blame the world. This is a terrible world. There are saints, there are sadhus, there are wise people at any point of time. There was never a time, there is never a time, there will never be a time when teachers, mystics, saints, wise people are absent. No, they are always present. Sri Krishna talks about it. In saying so, he actually reflects many an Upanishadic teaching. In the Brihadaranyaka, for example, Maitreyi asks her own husband Yajnavalkya, and then Yajnavalkya not only teaches her. If Maitreyi had not asked, he would have just walked away. When he divided his property between Maitreyi and Katyayani and said, I am going away for tapas, they could have just accepted it. All right, good luck. But Maitreyi says, wait a minute. What makes you leave all your wealth? Then there is a very wonderful dialogue. And over there, Yajnavalkya says, Atmava are shrotavyaha, mantavyaha, nididhyasitavyaha. We got to, every one of us has to make a beginning. Somebody may make a beginning at the age of 20, somebody may make a beginning at the age of 80. Doesn't matter. This 20, 80, etc. applies to the body. The soul that you are is ageless. You have had many lives, and unless you get enlightened, you will have many more lives. Therefore, even though at age 80, physically you may be weak, spirituality doesn't ask you to do some high jump or long jump or some race. It doesn't ask you for any physical ability. If you have a receptive mind, if you have certain freshness even for 2 hours in a day, 24 hours, 2 hours you are fresh and light and receptive and open. That's enough. Spend those 2 hours where you have inner energy and freshness in Shravana, Manana, which finally leads to Nididhyasana. Lord Krishna reflects that. In fact, in Brihadaranyaka it is said, if a man knows who he really is, why would he anymore suffer following the ill health and other problems of the body? Today something happens to the body and we are miserable. So much of our time and energy goes into ensuring comfort for our body. That is our worldly life, endlessly. In fact, the so-called developed countries, if you really take a second look at it, they have labored and labored to make their physical life very efficient, clean, neat, and so on. No guarantee of inner freedom. So Swami Chinmayananda used to humorously say, in this world, most people are unhappy. A good number are unhappy uncomfortably, and the so-called rich people are unhappy comfortably. In a wonderful, beautiful house, maybe centrally air conditioned and whatnot, they feel lonely, they feel life has no meaning and so on. Very few people, not because of the physical comfort around them, but because of wisdom, are happy. Wisdom makes them happy with just minimum conveniences. We don't say that go sleep somewhere where there are 100 mosquitoes. There should be right food, right sleep, minimum, depending on how you have grown up, whatever. And that also changes from person to person. But without making a big issue of just physical comfort and more convenience, more efficiency in travel and other things, without making too much of an issue of it, if we focus on, as the Brihadaranyaka Shruti says, Atmanam ched vijaniyat ayamasmiti purushaha kimicchan kasya kamaya shariram anusanjvaret. You would not become so dependent on one hand on your own body, in an extended sense on the success and failure of your personality. On the other, you won't depend upon how many people praise you, how many people find fault with you, etc. There is definitely a certain inner rise, an inner elevation, an inner awakening which makes a huge difference to human life. That is the gift of Jnana. So, Sri Krishna talks about what Jnana is, how we are to attain that Jnana, what are the daily life values which make possible that receptivity. In the chapter 13, as an example, when I say as an example, what I mean is there are many other places also where Sri Krishna talks of such things. In chapter 13, Amanitvamadambhitvam ahimsa kshantirarjavam, and so on. Humility, absence of hypocrisy, cleanliness, truthfulness. A list of 20 values are given, and surprising you and me, at the end of it, rather than saying these are the values that make your mind pure and that pure mind will then get knowledge, Lord Krishna takes the liberty of saying these are knowledge. Etad jnanam iti proktam ajnanam yad ataha anyata. That, of course, is a manner of saying. What is meant actually is where there are these noble qualities about the way you live your life, knowledge is bound to take place. That liberating insight is bound to take place. Therefore, if these values are equated with the highest wisdom, it would not be wrong. Because where these are, there will be the highest wisdom. Now, Lord Krishna talks about bhaktas and jnanis, both with great love and regard. In 7th chapter, he says, four kinds of people adore me, love me, four kinds of people worship me in whatever way you take that word bhajante. Chaturvidha bhajante mam janaha sukritinah Arjuna. Artha, jijnasuhu, artharthi, and jnani cha bharatarshava. Some, in the south of India, we have a saying, Sankata Bandaga Venkata Ramana. When there is Sankat, some adversity, they think of God. That is Artha. In difficult times, they remember God. Otherwise, they have other things to do. Then Jijnasu, people like me who give lectures, they are interested in knowledge so that they can write books and give lectures. They are also not the best kind of devotees. Chaturvidaha bhaktaha. Third one is artharthi, wealth. Wealth as well as power and greater security, some fame, name, position. That is the third kind. Now the context is of jnana. And Lord Krishna places jnani, one who has the highest wisdom on the highest level. Jnani cha bharatarshava. Tesham jnani nitya yuktaha eka bhaktir vishishyate priyo hi jnani notyartam aham sacha mama priya. He is very dear to me and I am very dear to him. Who? Jnani. If some people say this is all your interpolation, extrapolation, your sumpolation, it is. Gita is all about bhakti. If somebody overemphasizes, we would humbly say, friends, it's not really, it's really, there is a request from participants. Whenever you share a shloka, they want to know the shloka number as well. Yes, I will try to give. So Chaturvidha Bhajante Mam is 7.16. 7th chapter, 16th shloka. So, if it is asked, has Sri Krishna talked anywhere keeping bhakti and jnana together in parallel? Of course, in the 12th chapter, Arjuna begins with a question and Sri Krishna answers, saying, some look at the highest truth, personifying it as God. That is Bhakti Yoga. There is certain highest truth. All religions talk about something very high. That highest truth is looked at as God and looked at as a person, father, mother, and so on, or the creator and so on. That is Bhakti Yoga. Whereas there is a second category, and Lord Krishna in very clear terms says, there are people, yetu aksharam anirdeshyam avyaktam paryupasate sarvatragam achintyam kutastam achalam dhruvam. So, chapter 12, shloka number 3. Akshara, imperishable, anirdeshya, that which cannot be defined, avyakta, that which never expresses itself in any manner, sarvatragam, all pervasive, achintyam, unthinkable, beyond thought, kutastham, the very anchor or very support for everything, achalam, unchanging, unmoving. That is the pointer to that Brahma Tattva. The description of God as a person is not here. Impersonal truth. 12.3. And right there, placing the two side by side, Sri Krishna says, for most people to look at the highest truth in a personified manner works better. Because this appreciating the reality as having no name, no form, no quality, having no boundary, present everywhere, etc., is not everybody's cup of tea. So he openly admits that Jnana Yoga, which is about appreciating the truth as it is, without any name and form, is more difficult. The much quoted shloka is 12.5 Kleshodhikatarastesham avyaktasakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukkham dehavadbhiravapyate. This adoration of the unmanifest, avyakta, adoration of that which has no name, which has no label, which is outside, inside, which is in fact beyond space and time, that involves kleshaha adhikataraha. Adhika itself means more. Adhikataraha means even more. All spirituality is, when you really come down to it, difficult. All spirituality is, when you attend a satsang and get excited, you feel, it is so nice. One of the very wonderful teachers of Bhagavad Gita and spirituality in general, Eknath Ishwaran, jokes in one of his books. He says, when he was giving some lectures on Gita in Berkeley, in California, one evening, a young person came and Ishwaran felt good. Wow, there is some young person coming here. Because generally in spiritual programs, more older people attend. And that young man, maybe a graduate or undergraduate student at the University of California in Berkeley, after the lecture came to Ishwaran and said, I'm excited. This lecture was so good. And Professor Ishwaran looked at him, really, you liked it? That young man said, this is what I have been looking for all this time. The episode ends there. The next line in his book, Ishwaran writes, after that evening, I have been looking for that young man. He never appeared again. So, spirituality gives a bout of happiness, but not all are able to keep going. Therefore, even Bhakti Yoga is hard and Jnana Yoga is harder. Sri Krishna, however, does not hesitate to praise Jnana at a number of places. In fact, in the 4th chapter, verse number 19, there is a very beautiful expression. Jnanagni dagdha karmanam tamahu panditam buddha. He says, you know who is truly a wise person? In Sanskrit, Panda means wisdom. Pandita is one who has wisdom. Pandita as a Hindi Pandit, Sanskrit Pandit, or some community or some surname. There are some Pandit. Even Jawaharlal Nehru was called Pandit Nehru. That is secondary meaning. Primarily in the Vedanta texts, Pandita means having someone who has the highest wisdom. Who is a Pandita? The compound that I am referring to in 4.19 is Jnana Agni Dagdha Karmanam. One whose karmas, that means karma, karma phala, etc., which are a bondage, are burnt, turned to ashes by the fire of right seeing. If you see rightly, instantly all bondage goes away. In fact, it is interesting to see that in the 9th chapter, towards the end, Lord Krishna says, 30th shloka, chapter 9, even if somebody has lived in a very sinful manner, once somebody in a question answer session asked a great saint, have you also made mistakes? Maybe in the earlier part of your life. Now you are a saint, all of us respect you. But did you also make mistakes? That was the question. And that saint was so witty. and so transparent, so open, so humble. He looked at that young man and said, "Very good question. You are asking me whether I made mistakes in life. Give me a list of the mistakes possible, and I will tick all of them. There is no mistake which I had not done before I, got in touch with some sadhus and came on the track. There is no sin which I had not committed." That was the answer he had given. People bowed down before him. How humble he is. He did not cook up a story that, as soon as I was born free. He did not, lie in say, any manner. He didn't have the need to lie. He didn't say, "Oh, when I got up, when I was born, right away I started walking on water and lotus leaves came up to support me, blah, blah." Nothing of that sort. Rather, he honestly said, "There is no mistake which I had not done. I was living a sinful life. Then life changed." That's great hope for all of us. So, ninth chapter, 30th shloka, "Api chet suduracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhurev samantavyah samyak vyavasito hi saha kshipram bhavati dharmatma shashvachantim nigacchati partha kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati." No matter how much we have messed up our life, in that ninth chapter, it is a praise of bhakti, our topic um, in another lecture. Through bhakti, even the most sinful person, on the third evening, we are going to take up bhakti. All his sins, all his disorderly life just leaves him. He will regain order, order in daily life. That is bhakti. But very much like that, I already quoted 4.36. Api chedasi papebhyah sarvebhyah papakrittamah sarvam jnana plavenaiva vrijinam santarishyasi. So Lord Krishna is not partial to bhakti or jnana, but from an Upanishadic point of view, from a Siddhanta point of view, jnana is the last phase. Even the great bhaktas, without making an issue of it, or they might not have written a book on wisdom, but their liberating moments, the moments of their highest insight, were marked by seeing the oneness of all life. In the 18th chapter, Lord Krishna talks about three kinds of jnana: tamasika jnana, rajasika jnana, and sattvika jnana. In fact, the sattvika jnana is described this way: 18th chapter, 20th verse, Sarva bhuteshu yenaikam bhavamavyayamikshate. That sattvika, the highest, purest form of jnana, is ekam ikshate. We see oneness. All are one. All are God only appearing in that form. That means such a broad-mindedness, such letting go of hurt, letting go of vengeance, letting go of some kind of grudge that we generally tend to keep. For example, somebody had insulted us, we wish to teach him a lesson. Sometimes we may not try to do, but we hope somebody will teach him a lesson. And when we get the news, somebody gave it to him, we are quietly happy. Ah, there is justice in life. That man or that lady who insulted me got it today from that other person. Isn't it? That is also an impurity and not easy to get out of it, but we can get out of it. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. I must, before concluding, mention how Adi Shankaracharya throws light on the nature of Vidya in order to throw light on the nature of Vidya, the supreme wisdom. He has to throw light on what this spiritual ignorance is, avidya. In fact, if you want plenty of insights into Jnana Yoga, it is chapter 13 which supplies that. Commenting on the second shloka, Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra kshetrajnayor jnanam yatta jnanam matam mama. Shloka 2 of chapter 13. I am the Kshetrajna in every body. Body is the field, the pure consciousness that illumines the body, that knows what happens in the mind, what happens in the senses, what happens on any level. That principle of knowing, Kshetrajna, I am, says Lord Krishna. This is a wonderful basis, and there are many other shlokas also which provide similar basis for the non-dual outlook. Shankara raises a question, meaning to clarify things. He creates an imaginary opponent who asks a question. All right, if it is spiritual ignorance, who has this spiritual ignorance? There is a wonderful line, Sa avidya kasya iti, in the Shankara Bhashya. And Shankara's answer, Adi Shankaracharya's answer is simply amazing. He doesn't say the mind has ignorance. Then there is pure self and mind. Where is then Advaita? The two factors. He doesn't say the Jiva has ignorance or Brahma has ignorance or Buddhi has ignorance. No, he doesn't say. The question is, who has avidya? His answer is, Yasya drishyate tasya eva. Literally taken, whoever is seeing this duality, whoever is seeing one's own ego, has that ignorance. To slightly rephrase it, we may as well say, okay, the question is who has ignorance? The one who is asking the question has ignorance. And if the person asking the question persists, okay, one who is asking the question has ignorance. Who is asking the question? The answer would be a question is coming and you better know who is asking the question. And that right away brings you to Ramana Maharshi's famous query, who am I? I am ignorant. Oh, really? Who is saying that? I am saying that. I am saying it. Who is this I? Who am I? This, friends, it has profound significance. That means it is not that the spiritual truth has actually turned into ego, like milk turns into curd, milk turns into yogurt over a few hours. Has Brahma, the supreme truth, become Jiva, become you and me? And then do we have to walk back? No, there has been no becoming. In other words, truth is ever free, and this erroneous perception and the entity that has this erroneous perception are together as one whole, one indivisible, inseparable scenario. So I will briefly say that erroneous perception, the one who has error, one who is apparently suffering, all together is called avidya bhumi. There is no avidya separately, which comes and catches hold of somebody and makes him a jiva, etc. If you, that is childish to imagine like that. You know, here is Brahman and avidya comes dancing, and yeah, that is childish. There's nothing called avidya hanging loose, you know, coming towards Brahman, and then Brahman is caught in avidya. Rama Rama. All that imagination is childish. Because this is not within the phenomenal universe. This is a mind-blowing insight. How, in lack of inquiry, all this duality, this plurality seems to be real. When there is inquiry, there is no avidya. Na vidyate iti avidya. Even etymologically, that is one of the expansions of the word avidya. Lastly, I will quote once more a shloka, in fact, a pair of shlokas, which reflect the Upanishadic insight that there is one truth, and if one were to see that one truth, all are seen in oneself, or one sees oneself in all. Ishavasya has two mantras, 6 and 7. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevanupashyati sarvabhuteshu chatmanam tato na vijugupsate yasmin sarvani bhutani atmaivabhut vijanatah tatra ko moha kashokaha ekatvam anupashyatah are two mantras in the Ishavasya Upanishad. Sri Krishna echoes. The pratidhvani of them comes here, chapter 6, verse number 30. Yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvancha mai pashyati. Whoever sees me, says Sri Krishna. Here that me is not Vasudeva Krishna, that manifest form. Sri Krishna is speaking in a yoga aruda state. And what it means is, Sri Krishna, by saying me or I, is referring to a limitless Sat-Chit existence awareness principle. Whoever sees me in everything and everything in me, that means the perception of things being divided and separated is erroneous perception. Everything is in the divine is in everything. We are in the divine is in us. Therefore, that union, that unification, that yoga is a matter of very subtle understanding. And that understanding is possible for you and me. We should not waste life on the endless pursuits of things that come and go. We must simplify our life, especially our psychological life. Simplify doesn't mean sell away a big house and move to a small flat. No. Let the house be big, let your car, those are, secondary. Psychologically, have you complicated your life by fancying, I want to become this, I want to become that, I want to let them know who I am? These are all psychological aberrations. So letting them go, putting them aside, if we save our energy for this inquiry, then the duality, the plurality, and especially the ego in us just melts away and there is freedom. So mukti, moksha, or in simpler language, ending of sorrow, is the gift that jnana, pure wisdom, gives to us, and the discipline of pursuing that jnana is jnana yoga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yes, over to Shri Vinaya Chandra.
Namaste, Swamiji. Thank you very much for this wonderful, lucid presentation. I have many things to just share with you what has inspired me after listening to you. But meanwhile, I would like to open up the session for the question answers. So we can take up the question answers. I request all our participants to kindly type in your questions in the chat box. It's now open, so we can take up the questions from there, and we will present it to Swamiji. As you take time to put up the questions, I would like to make a couple of announcements at the moment. We have many events ongoing. So this is the Weekend with Wisdom, which will run for next 2 days. So we'll be looking into Karma Yoga tomorrow and Jnana Yoga. And Swamiji has been kind enough to give his time 3 days with us. So this is the event that's running. But we also have various kinds of courses that are in the offline. Currently, we are running a course called Essentials of Yoga Tradition and Philosophy, which will look into the entire evolution of yoga right from the Vedic times to the current times. So an interesting course, but that is midway through. In January, we'll be starting another course in association with Krishnamacharya Yoga Mandiram, the most reputed institute in the field of yoga. Srimati Nritya Jagannathanji will be offering this course on Yoga 360. See, yoga is many things for us. It is a science, it is a discipline of sadhana, it is also a philosophy. So, how do we combine all the three perspectives and have a holistic appreciation of the field of yoga, and especially keeping Patanjali's Yoga Sutras in mind? This will be the approach of Yoga 360 program that will start in the month of January. All the details about the course are available on Indica Yoga website, indicayoga.com. So you can have a look at it, and all our events are recorded and they are presented. We have a dedicated YouTube channel called Indica Yoga. So all these sessions, including today's sessions, will be made available for everyone. So in case you have missed any part, not only if you have missed, but even if you have heard, these are some things that you would want to go back again, just like a cow takes up all that it can get, but it's only later it recalls back and starts chewing and digesting them. So you definitely want to go back to this wisdom again and again. So please make use of the Indica Yoga website, YouTube channel that is available, and all these sessions would be there available. So with these announcements, I would now like to go back to questions. So we have a question from Chandrasekhar ji, who has asked, maybe Swamiji, I'll just present the questions that are there.
Better.
Yeah, you take a liberty, which one you want to answer or how you would like to respond to it.
I will answer all of them, go one by one.
Okay, yeah. So kindly explain the concept of God as per Lord Buddha Mahavira and how Advaita perspective is different.
Lord Buddha and Lord Mahavira were
So
silent.
maybe, okay. So maybe the Advaitic perspective of God in relationship with the other perspectives, and especially the Bauddha and Jaina perspectives.
So we say Advaita perspective is accommodative of God as someone whom people may worship, God who blesses devotees, who answers their prayers, God who created, who runs, and then who dissolves the universe. So those descriptions that apply to God, I now carefully say, those descriptions are accommodated, but Advaita doesn't say that is the ultimate truth. On a certain level, Advaita says yes. And then as you go higher, the only truth is Brahman, which is of the nature of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. Rest of it is all in what is called the relative domain, the examples galore are available. You have a pencil in a glass of water, it looks bent. So to say, hey, look there, the pencil is bent, also has its validity. A rainbow with 7 colors has its validity. But on a higher level, what appears as a rainbow is only water molecules. And what appears bent is not bent. Likewise, Advaita Vedanta, while accommodating on one level God the creator and you and me being created, on a higher level says there is no such division, there is only Brahman. Whereas Buddha and Mahavira completely avoided this, this concept of God. And by doing so, I don't think they literally dismissed God. They said that you don't need it. Concern yourself with tapas, with meditation, end your sorrow, be done with it. So Buddha therefore did not say there is no God. They say Buddha observed noble silence when he was asked about God. Hope that should be enough.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you for that clarity and think that is very helpful. So I'll move on to the next question by Nagavamshi Velankanti ji, who is asking, Swamiji, you have explained about Satvika Jnanam by example as someone who's got insulted, whose feelings are insulted and yet not responding or reacting. But Sri Krishna supported Pandava's revenge over their insult by Duryodhana and his fellow Kauravas. Why?
Yes, Sri Krishna, while instructing Arjuna, respected Arjuna's level of evolution. See, some of us, let us say, are full of reverence for sannyasa, let us say. And we get an opportunity to go to a high school and speak to children. Would it not be utterly wrong to say to all the children, look, children, you all want to become doctors or engineers or lawyers or businessmen? I tell you, they are all very, very impermanent. Earlier the better. Take sannyas. It would be so terrible. So when we go to high school and address boys and girls, knowing well that becoming rich or becoming some professional doesn't solve all problems, we encourage them, work hard, study well, don't waste your time, and do well in your exams, do well in your extracurricular activities. So we encourage them. So likewise, Arjuna's personal swadharma was on a lower level. If Arjuna had the Viveka and Vairagya, like Uddhava had in Bhagavatam, to whom Sri Krishna gives green signal to walk away, Sri Krishna would have given the green signal to Arjuna to walk away. But very clearly, Arjuna did not have that maturity. He was very bold, brave, heroic, that's okay. But Vairagya he did not have. And most of us also don't have, let us admit it. So we too have to work on our better performance of Swadharma. We have some duties, and if we have been failing in our duty, we must not neglect it. And when we have adequate Vairagya, we would know it. There is a whole different flavor to our life then. I hope I have answered the question.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you. In fact, this is what Krishna says in the third chapter when he says, Na buddhi bedam janayet ajnanam
Yeah.
karma sanginam
Yes.
joshayet sarva karmani. Yeah.
Yes.
So going further, I'd like to take up this very interesting question from Ravichandran Venkatesh ji, who is asking, Swamiji, as you are aware of JK's teaching, because you spent substantial time there as well, although JK doesn't call it as his teachings, how does one reconcile with the scriptures like Bhagavad Gita, the teachings that you find in the Gita, and the teachings of or the insights of J. Krishnamurti? Like they seem to
Yeah.
be slightly different approaches.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile them?
It is like this. In fact, a good understanding of the scenario, J. Krishnamurti over here and Gita and Upanishads, etc., over here, a good understanding need to be. Now I am unmuted. Yeah. For myself, I mean, my own spiritual journey, there was a time in the 1980s when I went and heard J. Krishnamurti in Madras, Chennai. Nothing, it went above my head. For myself also, the bridge was Ramana Maharshi. So, if you see the teachings of Ramana Maharshi, then this can be reconciled. Okay, without making it complex, the okay, Krishnamurti is someone who doesn't leave room for stepping stones. He doesn't accommodate different levels in spiritual practice. Whereas traditional wisdom, as expressed in Gita and so on, they are accommodative. Ramana Maharshi was accommodative. If somebody went to Ramana saying, I chant Vishnu Sahasranama daily, Maharshi Ramana would say, very good, please do it. You will eventually find the question rising from within you. Who is chanting? Who am I? So Maharshi Ramana accommodated various practices, which is the real flavor of Sanatana Dharma, whereas J. Krishnamurti scoffed at, mocked at all these practices, saying, you are just going in circles. One of his famous statements was, you have been plowing and plowing and plowing. When will you stop plowing and sow the seed? So
Beautiful.
all these practices were looked at by him as taking us nowhere. So in two words, tradition and Krishnamurti can be summed up. Tradition is accommodative, and at a certain height, it speaks of the highest truth. J. Krishnamurti was not accommodative. He was impatient and he said to people, come on, leave all that, see it this way. So, that liberating vision is what he was so passionate about. And a lot of people could not make head or tail of it.
Just if I can extend this question, Swamiji, how was it personally for you? Did you have conflict in reconciling them? Because this is a great insight that you have achieved, perhaps after dealing with this question for yourself. So, how was it for you personally?
So, I told you in the 80s, I did not appreciate Krishnamurti. And when people told me that Krishnamurti criticizes because he never studied the Gita, so I bought that answer. I said maybe. And when I tried to read J. Krishnamurti those days, wherever he questioned scripture, guru, God, etc., my mind went on a defensive. No, it's not like that. I was as though saying to J. Krishnamurti, who was, of course, gone by 86. But when, thanks to more and more exposure to Ramana Maharshi's self inquiry, who am I? Who am I? As I got a little handle on the wisdom of self inquiry, everything changed.
Hmm.
Krishnamurti's self observation, self watching, keeping an eye on the movement of the little self, which we call ego, he calls it the self with a lowercase s. That self observation and self inquiry gel together. So today, as I am even now highly involved in Krishnamurti's works. Um, for me, they are beautifully complementing each other.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you for this synthesis. Next one, we have a question from Archana ji, who is asking. In fact, I think this is a question that most of us share. I seem to take one step forward and two step on this path. So this is
Okay.
mainly about sadhana, the personal sadhana, and the quest that all of us have. How to keep up the momentum.
Hmm. Yeah. First of all, Archana ji, who said, I take one step forward and two steps backward. Should not worry about it because a whole lot of company she has in that process. So many people are like that. It's very common to come across people who say not able to make progress and so on. It may require a little more of study, a little more of mature study. See, what I call mature studies, even in spiritual study, there are several levels. On a lower level, it is all about these are to be done. If you do them, you are doing well in sadhana. If you fail to do them, you are not doing well. So it is very judgmental and it's full of these do's and don'ts. Whereas the mature study I am referring to is where one does not condemn oneself while one is aware. I got up late and leave alone the morning puja. I had to rush to work without even taking a bath. Oh, so one is aware how one slipped from something very orderly, but one doesn't blame oneself. Just as a loving parent, a caring parent notices the son has made a mistake, the daughter has made a mistake. Though the parent has noticed, the loving parent says at the most to the son, oh, so you could not do it. Okay, be careful next time, and so on. No condemnation, no scolding, no banging. So, can we treat our own mind with more care and love? That is higher study. So, mature study will, on one hand, free us from this guilt and shame, etc. On the other, in that same process, our what is that going two steps backward, that will reduce automatically.
Thank you, Swamiji, because this is very important for anyone in the path of sadhana to know that there is no scope or there is no need for guilt. There could be
Yes.
errors which
Yes.
only make us to take more time, but definitely there is no concept of sin or guilt in the path of sadhana. I think that was a very important message. Thank you. So we have a question from Sunil Agarwalji, who is saying, Avidya is designated as Anadi, one without a beginning or without any cause. So that has already been associated with us. If that is
Yeah.
the case, how do we get rid of it? Is it ever
Hmm.
possible to get rid of
So, first of all, as it came out a little bit in my lecture towards the end, avidya is not to be looked at as a thing. It is not a thing. This erroneous seeing itself is avidya. So that is number one. And then this anadi is not uh, with the idea that time is real. Suppose we were to say time is real and certain things have a beginning here. Think of an axis of time. You know, as in mathematics, graphically we write a line, a long horizontal line, and we make points. At T1, you know, such and such thing began. Like at T2, India got independence. At T3, Radhakrishnan became president. And T4, Indira Gandhi died. So events have been marked on T1, T2, T3 time points. So avidya is anadi doesn't mean that it has been there from the beginning. Actually, what it means is it is subtler than time also. Time itself is a byproduct of avidya. Rather than time being the basis for avidya, rather than our being able to show avidya as beginning here and ending over there, actually, when there is avidya, time and space appear. So the second part of the question, how do we end it? Vidya. When there is right seeing, as the expression goes, space, time, ignorance, all of them, lock, stock, and barrel, leave the scene. They go away together.
Thank you. So we have this wonderful comment from Katyayani Suryadevarji, who says, every experience seems to be valid in its own way. Understanding the blissful nature of Atma beyond all this may be challenging. Yet, your beautiful discourse helps us realize that it is worth the pursuit. Thank you so much for the beautiful session.
I have some other engagement. I'll take another 2 questions.
Sure.
Others can write an email to you. You can forward to me, whatever. Something can be.
Yeah. So this question is from Anjuji, who's saying, Pranam Swamiji, a very useful and knowledgeable session. And also she has bracketed, it's not like that young man that you were referring to, that she will not run away.
Yeah.
My question is this: how the knowledge of the Gita can be implemented in our day-to-day life? Is there any simple way, some simple suggestions, practices that you would like to share? Of course, you were referring to them in the course of the discourse, but is there any tips at the end that you would want to leave us with?
Let me share with the questioner what I have advised people for 35 years. And recently I have started practicing it myself. It is nothing but, we have 3 aspects of the personality: the physical body, the emotional mind, and the thinking intellect. For these 3, body, mind, and intellect, we should try to be regular in exercise, meditation, and study. Exercise for the body, and take exercise in a larger sense, not just exercise, right food and right rest, all part of it. Then meditation is not any particular kind of meditation, whichever suits you, even breathing exercise or listening to some instrumental music, sitting quietly. These tone down or tone up. These improve our emotional intelligence. Thirdly, intellect, thinking intellect, which is study. So, exercise, meditation, and study. Now, Ekadashi is on 25th December, and that is also Christmas. This exercise, meditation, and study, I call the Christmas formula, XMS. So, don't wait for December 25, start today itself. Try to be as regular as possible in doing these 3. Some exercise for the body, some sitting quiet, praying, meditating for the emotional mind, and some amount of, even some half an hour of study of good material. This will drastically improve our capacity to live Gita.
I think this would be the wonderful note to conclude today's session, Swamiji. We had discussion on philosophy, but also how does it translate into action? I think that's where we would all require this guidance, and this has been beautifully brought about in this 3 words. People are familiar with SMS, so this is XMS. So exercise, meditation, and study. I think that would be a wonderful note for each one of us who have participated here to take. It's a take-home message. So thank you, Swamiji, for this lucid presentation. And in fact, the joy with which you were bringing it out, I think that's the nature of jnana itself. So bringing that joy in all of us. So thank you very much. We look forward to continuing the journey over next 2 days, looking into Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. And I also would like to thank all our participants who have been with us in this wonderful journey. So looking forward to see you all, meet you all tomorrow, same session, same time from 6 to 7:30. Namaste. Dhanyavad.
Namaste.
Shubharatri.
Namaste, everybody.